if the mission is for people to be seen, heard, and valued, then we have to be intentional to see them when they walk in, make eye contact, right? Welcome them when they come in, hear what they're saying, not just their order, what's behind the order, right? And then let them know that they're valued. When you remember their drink, when you remember their name, when you remember that, hey, last time I talked to you, is your mom okay now? Like you said that you had to go to the hospital or whatever to see her. And that blows people's minds. No, at that point we just had the one and the trailer, but we'd already started planning for Demarest and Gainesville.
Okay. And since then, we're sitting in part of your vision right now.
Right.
The one next door, you didn't say that was your first one, was it?
Yes.
That was the first
the
one.
250 square feet.
Okay. And how much is this one now?
This is almost 4,000 square feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
A little bigger.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
A little cozier.
Little
than
cozier.
The one before.
Yeah. I mean, just the bar area is bigger than the whole shop over there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you went to go tell her about your vision, tell us about what your vision was for it. Because am I remembering right? This has been in the works for the last 5 or 6 years.
So we opened in March of 21. But a lot of times you either start something with a big vision or you don't. And in this case, like we just wanted to, it was in the midst of COVID, and this was this was just an idea. It was actually Marilyn's fault because we had talked about this little place before and thought, man, that would be a cool coffee shop, for someone else to build. Not,
the best ideas are always for somebody else to accomplish.
It was definitely for somebody else. And so we were driving through the square and Marilyn said, hey, I think that little place is vacant. And I'm like, no way. It's impossible. So we went around the circle again. And sure enough, like there was paper up there. The sign was down. And so I texted one of my buddies and he knows all the people. He's related to half of them, I guess. And I said, man, who owns this little spot? And he said, well, the city owns it. And so the timing was, reached out to the city and he said, hey, tomorrow we're having a meeting because there's 3 other people that want that space. And he said, if you can get me like a proposal to hand tomorrow, then, we'll see what happens. So of course I used all my special abilities of Photoshop and, I didn't even have AI back then.
Yeah, it was before it was invented.
Yeah, I just did it. I took a picture of it. I transformed it. I put coffee on there. I put a logo on the building. I did all these mock-ups and then created a short business plan and sent it to him that night, like 3 a.m., probably 3 or 4. And so he texted me after the meeting. He said, hey, they're interested in the city really wants to know more about what you guys want to do. And I'm like, well, we don't even know what we want to do. It was just kind of like, man, we got to figure out a way to make money because I wasn't doing full-time ministry anymore because I'd stepped down because we were doing the traveling with the one organization. But at this point, it wasn't just marriage retreats. It was marriage retreats. It was like conferences they were doing. It was all these other training things. And I was there. I wasn't just doing music anymore, but I was doing music. And now I was doing video as well because I had the video company. So I'm doing video for them, doing video for churches. And then COVID happened. And then the videos kind of came to a halt. Then all I was doing is helping old people get on Zoom. And it became really tiring after that. I'm like, yo, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. You're on mute. You're on mute. Anyway, I got so tired of it. I was just desperate. Lord, what can I do? What can I do? And so he answered with this coffee shop.
So at one point you were in full-time ministry. Did I hear that right?
Yes. So we're going all over the place, aren't we? So
wherever the Spirit leads is where we're going to go.
And I'm laughing because Marilyn in the back is making, when I said old
You
people.
wanted her to sit
When I
there.
said old people, she was just like, stop, Steven, please.
Full-time ministry. At one
Okay.
point you were there.
Yeah. It all started. It all started over 40 something years ago when I was born. And
The whole origin story. Let's start at the beginning and give us the long version.
Oh man. So anyway, my dad's a pastor, so I grew up in the ministry, and then ended up moving to Florida when I was ready to get out of the house, and then I went, and that's when I met Marilyn in Miami, Florida. I went from Tennessee to Miami, and so then we were basically in full-time ministry for a few years, and then I worked in American Express, and then back in full-time ministry, and then back to Florida, and then we were in Georgia, and then we were back in Florida again, and then finally we came to the little town of Cleveland, Georgia. And so we didn't really know what to do. Just felt like I wanted to get back into music ministry again. So the Lord led us here, and that was like 2014, I guess. And then, so because I get bored easily, I couldn't just be a music pastor. While I'm doing the music, then I start this video company with some friends. And then I'm doing that, and then I'm selling cars, and then I'm also doing the retreat things, so we're making extra money doing that.
No wonder you needed a coffee shop.
Yeah.
You needed some energy.
I think I had an Etsy store as well. I did Etsy store. I was doing Turo. We bought a Jeep and rented it out on Turo. And let's see, what else did I do? I can't remember now, but anyway, I couldn't just sit in my office, I had to do something. So then 2019, I stepped down from the full-time ministry to focus more on just the video stuff, because that's kind of what was taking off. So trying to ride that wave, and then COVID kind of took that. The wave died down. I fell off my surfboard.
Lots of waves died around then.
Yeah. So it was, just like God to take something like a coffee shop in the middle of COVID when everybody is social distanced, to say, hey, start something that's against all the rules right now, But yeah, so, when we opened, the idea was just, we wanted to have this, number one, maybe we can make money, and that's enough for us while COVID is happening. And then once COVID, once we're past this, then I can get back to work doing other things. But in the meantime, it's this cute little, this probably slow coffee shop where our kids can do their homework. Like one kid can sit at the counter and do homework, while people come in. But that didn't happen. Like it was the moment we opened, like we were working like 90 hours a week.
Wow.
And our kids, don't tell child labor.
They were not doing homework at the counter, were they?
They were not doing homework at all, kind of, for a while, because they were working like 50 hours a week. So it was us four. It was me and Marilyn and Caleb and Josh. And I think Caleb was 16. I don't remember, 16, and Josh was 15. But they'd never worked before. So all of a sudden now they're getting up at 5:30 in the morning, like little zombies, But
did they get themselves some coffee when they started?
Amazing. They had never had coffee yet until we opened. So our first training of how to operate an espresso machine, they had their first coffee.
Did they like it?
They loved it.
Really?
Yes.
They didn't have to acquire the taste, or did they just need to wake up at that point?
Maybe part of it was just they were so excited because, much to their mother's dismay,
they were allowed to drink it.
Yeah. It's like, hey, it's for work, Mom.
Right. They have to know what's good.
We have to do this. Right.
It's part of their training.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I mean, it just grew from there, and then, I mean, the crazy thing was that when we first decided to open, we knew nothing about coffee or how much coffee equipment costs or anything like that. And I think we had $5,000 in the bank, and we thought, well, that's a tiny little place. Like $5,000 should be enough because nobody's going to sit. All we got to do is build some counters, and we can put like a coffee drip machine.
I'm guessing that wasn't the case.
That was not the case, because then first we had to find somebody that would do our beans. So we found a local roaster, right? Talked to him, and then he connected us to the guy that would be able to know about the equipment. And so the first thing, we made our list, and it was like espresso machine, $15,000. We're like, well, there we go. I guess we're not doing this thing. What
was the thought process at that point, seeing as you felt like this is something that you wanted to do, and then the numbers keep going up? Does it seem less feasible, or does it make you more excited that it seems impossible, but let's figure out how to do it?
I think because we didn't really have a vision for it at all. Like we had no expectations at all. And, kind of like, what is it? The girl in Spider-Man, she says, if you don't have any expectations, you can never be disappointed. So it's kind of like we didn't really know what to expect. It wasn't like this. We didn't like wake up and have this vision that, this is something we want to do. So like when the obstacles come, we're going to do whatever it takes. It was like, I think at that point we've had this saying since we opened the shop of following breadcrumbs. So it's kind of like one thing takes you to the next thing, takes you to the next thing. And it's just these little moments and little steps. So, when that happened, it was just, we were in the car and we were talking, and we just kind of laughed together and thought, well, that was hilarious for us to imagine that we're going to do this. And, we don't even have enough money for one piece of equipment, So, what was interesting is that maybe like, I think it was like the week before, my parents live in Cleveland, Tennessee, so about 2 hours away. And my mom had told me about this coffee shop that was going out of business in Cleveland. And she said, yeah, they're going out of business. They're selling some equipment and stuff. And so we drove over there, and it was like going to be like $2,000 for a few things or whatever. And so I left my wallet at home. So we were actually in Blairsville meeting them halfway. We're going to have dinner. They had my wallet. And so if you backtrack just maybe a few weeks, during COVID, they had like the PPP loan, and they had like disaster assistance or whatever. And I heard about it and from a guy at church, and he said, man, you ought to do that like disaster thing. Like you can get some money. And I said, okay, well, let me try. So I'd gone online and to see if I could get one of the loans. I didn't qualify for a loan, or I didn't qualify for the grants for whatever reason. And, but of course, once again, it was really late at night and I didn't even remember what I did. But at some point in doing that application, I clicked something else to see if I was approved for a loan from the SBA. And I didn't remember this. And basically, like they were, I didn't really have any employees other than friends that just helped me in the video business. But, there was this, what they were doing is giving you like a high percentage of your yearly income during COVID for that loan. So fast forward now, we're in the car. Marilyn's got her book. We're laughing together, looking at this list. And we're like, man, that was funny. I guess we'll try something else. God will take care of us. We still got the $5,000 in the bank, and, so she went, she's reading her book. We're waiting on my parents. And then I get my phone out and I'm just checking emails. And then I see this email from the SBA And so I opened it up and it was like, you've been approved for $56,000 loan. So I just turned and I showed Marilyn. I said, well, maybe we're going to do the coffee shop.
Wow.
You know, so, but we were fine just giving it up. You know, we just thought, well, that was just funny. You know, we were going to try it because I try tons of things, you know, and I'm not married to them. You know, it's not like life or death. But yeah, so that kind of, it was serious after that, you know. Marilyn was like, yeah, don't tell anybody. So we went to dinner and, you know, we're sitting there going, wow, man, you know, and back then, like $56,000, we thought that was a whole lot of money, you know, for a business. And, so yeah, I mean, after that, it was just the journey of, yeah, I ended up getting COVID for 2 weeks. Marilyn's doing a bunch of stuff, getting the thing ready and all the permits and the approvals. And we're still praying like, God, we're going to keep moving forward. If you don't want us to do this, like, stop us, please, you know? And so sure enough, I mean, there was God. And along the way, God kept sending people, you know, like this one guy moved into town, but he was a international coffee judge. So he trained us, you know, and, you know, so all these really cool moments and stories as we were following the breadcrumbs, you know, to do what God wanted us to do it's pretty awesome.
Was it easier to see the breadcrumbs that he laid out, maybe in hindsight, looking back? Or was it as you're walking through it, you know, it's only going to be if he opens these doors and you're watching him open the doors?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious when you're walking through it, like, because there were answers we needed like in the moment. So when you know, when the breadcrumb showed up, it was obvious that it was a breadcrumb, you know. I mean, for example, just one example was we're trying to figure the layout of that little shop. So you could have it where you walk in and across it's 8 feet wide. So when you walk in, one idea was, okay, there's a counter, and that's the one that we ended up going with. There's a counter that just goes across and like one side lifts up and, you know, the rest of it is the shop and you know, people aren't sitting down, so we don't need a bathroom for customers. That was one idea. And another idea was when you walk in, like the counter will be there will be a space where you can walk down the side of the building, kind of like it's a rectangle. And so that was another idea. But then it was like, well, if it's going to be it could be really crowded, you know, and then we also have to create it in a way that a wheelchair can get down the side, right? So just as an example, we said, okay, well, let's just, you know, God gave us the name. I woke up in the middle of the night with the name Farmhouse Coffee. So God was just doing these crazy things the whole time. And we thought, well, let's just ask God. It's his shop. He knows whether we need to have more room or not, right? So Marilyn has, I think it's her devotion for the day, is this most random scripture. And she goes to the scripture and it talks about the locust. And it says something about the locust don't like to go this place because they're crowded. And it said, don't crowd in the literal scripture that day. So, I mean, that was, you know, the question was, do we have more space because it might be crowded, or is it okay if it's crowded? And then literally the scripture just told us it doesn't need to be crowded.
Wow.
You know, so it was just little things like that all throughout the whole time. I mean, it was just awesome.
Now, that seems like an evident theme, at least in how this place, all these places have come about. Does that seem like a theme you've seen throughout your life of seeing things being attributed to him? I don't know how this is going to work, but I know that Lord will pull through. Or is that something that has been more prevalent during this season of creating this vision?
Well, I think it's harder growing up in ministry, at least the way that I did, because I thought, hey, I'm going to be in ministry all my life. And that means that I'll probably be, I'm going to be in worship first, and then maybe I'll be worship youth pastor / youth pastor. And then at some point I'll probably be a pastor, and, it just seemed like that was the trajectory. And then at some point, God had started changing my heart to where I think it was actually when I graduated high school, I went on tour and started evangelizing at different churches and doing these revivals and stuff. And it was so weird because, places are asking you, okay, what do you charge? And, I'm just 18 years old, but that became something that was really hard to deal with, was how do I put a price tag on a church? And then also, what if I have one weekend available and then you have this church that can't pay what I feel like I'm worth, and then you got the other church that can pay, but what if I feel like I need to go to the church that can't pay? And it's this, it's these dilemmas that you get put in. And I think one day I just thought, man, can I just make money and do ministry for free, and then I don't ever have to worry about this? I don't ever have to say, okay, well, I can't sing in a living room in front of 20 people because they can't pay me what I'm going to make in front of 500 people or whatever. So it was just kind of like this juvenile kind of question to God, is this possible? Can I make money somehow and still do ministry and still serve you, because everybody would like to make money, right? I mean, I want a Lamborghini one day, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, I want a house and a Lamborghini and I want to have these cool things. But is that possible? Can I be, I've been, my parents were in the ministry and we were poor most of my life, so it was I was like, I don't know if this is possible. And then I read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it just, something happened. And while I'm going through this book, I'm just like, all of a sudden I'm starting to envision that I really can, there's a way that I really can be successful and do ministry. And then of course, then I found out that that's what Paul was doing. Paul was making tents. So he had a business, and then he was doing ministry. So he didn't have to be, and he said, I'm doing this so that I don't have to be a burden on, thank you for sending me money, but I'm doing this so I don't have to be a burden on you. Right. So after I started getting the theology of it, thinking, okay, well, I can, let me pursue business. I've always had great ideas and all this. Right. So I think to answer your question though, is when you first get excited about something, there's a level of ambition, I think, that you kind of maybe run ahead of God a little bit at the beginning. And then I think too, not too long after that, I got married. So if I'm having this journey and kind of revelation about my future and business and all these things when I'm 18, then just fast forward a few years later and I'm getting married, so now, I'm having to learn, okay, well, I've got all this ambition and I'm starting to chase after things. And then even after getting married, I think a lot of times, there were times where she was very patient and she just kind of let me make some decisions and do things where I probably could have taken a step back, where I kind of maybe I was trying to make things happen more, So the longer that we've been married, the more that I've realized the importance of us being in unity, right? And so I think we've done a lot of things up to this point, and even in business, she was homeschooling the kids and she was doing all that, and I was out kind of just hustling and bringing in money. But then this was a whole new, kind of like a whole new thing, because the timing of this, when we opened up this business, we were all doing it as a family. So everything really that we had done up to that point was kind of leading to this moment, to where now, I think it's been a little, I think we've been a little more, or I personally have been more mature in kind of allowing God to make it more obvious. And then when I feel like it's God, then we talk about it. So then we're in unity on the majority of the things that we do. Right. We pray together and we wait. We ask God to give us the answer, and so that we've really seen that God just, the more unified we are, I think the more the clearer that the signs are. When, of course it doesn't take faith away. You've got to have faith in what you're doing, and you have to trust, because, one of the things that we learned is that, it's that scripture I used to always hear when I was growing up, and I never really had a context for it. And it was, he uses the foolish to confound the wise. And, I've really realized that what that means is that he calls all of us to do things that we feel like we're inadequate to do. And it's for the purpose of us being a sign to everyone, but even more the secular world and people that God brings in our path that confounds them. Like you open a shop and you had one training for 4 hours, and it's just all of these things that God has done, because he just has somebody that says, sure, let's do it, and you have to just step out. And then through that, he uses your life to show that to others that it's not your strength or your ability, but it's his empowering, his empowerment, like through you, empowering you to do what he wants you to do, whether you're adequate or not. And the majority of the time we aren't adequate, right? He's, that's probably one of the biggest indicators whether something's God or not, is because he always asks you to do something that you have to rely on him to be able to accomplish it. Because if you feel like you can just do it on your own, how is he going to get the glory? He's going to be competing. Glory is going to be competing here, right? Whether it's your talent or your, the training that you've had, or the, skills and gifts and all that, or it's going to be, wow, there's like no way this could happen unless God did it, and all those little things. When you tell that story to people, even unbelievers, like all they can do is just go, wow. In their mind, they might be going, God, higher power, universe, whatever it is, the context that they have that they're trying to put a face on, it all of a sudden you're basically introducing them to the supernatural, because that's really what God is doing. Is he's coming into the natural and he's making it supernatural. He's empowering us to do something that is beyond what we have knowledge for, what we've been trained for, what we should, how we were raised, or the family that we were in, or whatever it is. It's for his glory,
And I think why that's such a rich reminder of you talking about that. And I love what you said. He's coming into the natural to show us the supernatural, to show us how he can work, is a lot of times people think about telling about what God did in very spiritual ways, whether it's within the buildings of a church, or we went on a mission trip and let me tell you about what God did. And people are sitting here saying, you're talking about a coffee shop. which is a very natural thing. We need energy. We need a
Yes.
great place to work. We need the ambiance and the atmosphere. But you telling your story, and that's what I love about this conversation is you're telling your story, but it's not for the sake of telling your story. It's for the sake of giving the credit back to God.
Yep.
And that gives so much value to everything that we do that is oftentimes not full-time ministry. And you know, you've been in both worlds. You've been in full-time ministry. You grew up around it. You've been on all of these business ventures. And the common thread is not kingdom work versus not. It's how can both of these things point to why we're here on earth? And I think a lot of times the business ventures are so much more tangible than sometimes what's going on inside the walls of a church or across the world on the mission field. Is you're telling your story, giving full credit to God, saying, we couldn't have done this otherwise.
Yep.
And it's interesting. I asked you to take our spiritual gift assessment before
Yes.
we came. And my dad says all the time that people will speak through the language of their spiritual gifts. And if you listen close enough, you can see how the Lord has gifted them to share and be a light to him through the way he's gifted them because of the language that they use, what stands out in their life. And the common theme and the breadcrumb that your story was leaving was that spiritual gift of faith.
Mhm.
It's watching the Lord do things that other people will miss, believing that his plans will prevail, his promises will be fulfilled, that if I pick up the breadcrumbs and I follow them, I believe that God will pull through. And if he
Right.
doesn't, that's not the direction that I'm supposed to go in.
Right.
And you telling your story just puts that on display. And you could think, well, how does the spiritual gift of faith help sell coffee? It might not be to sell coffee. It might be to be able to tell his story
Mhm.
and watch how the faith, that spiritual gift of faith was on display. And the whole point, yes, it's a great atmosphere for people to dive into his word, to talk to people, to share a space and host people and make them feel welcome and give them something that brings them energy. But if the whole point of the story is to say, but look what God did, then that's his gifting on display through you.
Yep.
And that's how you're using the way that you even tell a story to glorify him.
Yep.
And it makes
Amen.
it all worth it
Yep.
to me.
It does. I mean, it's, in like the first probably couple of years of having the shop, I mean, we saw more ministry, I think, in all my years in the church. I mean, it was, and it's not necessarily more is probably the wrong word, but I think in a sense it's more because when I use the word more, because I think you can get, especially if you're raised in the church and then you're kind of brought up in that environment, all of your friends are church people. So yeah, there might be a lot of ministry and there's people do change and people, we have great experiences with God, and you go to youth camp and you go to, whatever it is. But I think a lot of people end up getting, I don't know, being sheltered in a sense of, if you were to go into church and say, hey, how many friends do you have that don't go to church here? Or how many friends do you have that you would call a friend that is not a believer? And I think majority of church people don't have a lot of friends that are believers. And then I think too, sometimes our theology is an obstacle to us being friends with people that are not believers. Because, I mean, if you go through scripture, Jesus wasn't just an acquaintance to people that were like what they consider dirty and outcasts. Like, he was friends with, they use the word friend, you know what I mean? And I think that's hard for a lot of people, because to be a friend with somebody means that maybe you're walking through with them, maybe in an environment that you're not comfortable with, And so what we started doing was, over these little interactions of giving coffee to people, we became friends with people, right? And it didn't matter if they were a church person. It didn't matter. Like, the natural progression was every time we had this 5 minutes, we would get to know them better. They would get to know us better. And then we would become friends, you know? And I remember one day telling Marilyn, like, you know, I think if we had a space big enough to have a church on Sunday morning and just say, hey, we're going to meet and talk about spiritual stuff Sunday, and we're not open on Sunday, but there's free coffee. Would you want to come and just hang out?
That free coffee would get folks.
I think people that would not go to a church would come into our coffee shop, you know? And God kind of, from the very beginning, he gave us this mission of, when somebody comes in, that they're going to be seen, heard, and valued, leaving less alone. And which was very, you know, apropos for being in a pandemic where there was so much distance, right? And we just talked to a bunch of students at a college this week, and we were talking about that. We were talking about how hospitality, really what it does is hospitality lessens the distance between people.
That was your second highest spiritual gift, by the way.
What is it? Hospitality. Oh, okay. It's my wife's first. But the hospitality, as you're serving people, like, it actually lessens the distance in between. You know, we were just talking to him. We were like, man, who is our example in hospitality? I mean, Jesus, right? Jesus, there was so much distance between us and him, and he intentionally left where he was, and he came to earth to remove that distance.
That's so good.
You know, but not just distance in proximity, but distance of the heart, you know? So it's important. Obviously, people are coming into the shop asking us, they're paying us to give them something. So, you know, the distance there is automatically, if they're coming in, it's marketing is going to take care of that. But the distance of heart is really the purpose behind the coffee, right? I mean, if God opened the doors, and he wants the community to be impacted, people's lives to be impacted, then we just saw every interaction, you know, that distance of heart would just get less and less and less. And, you know, we've just, the friends that we've made and the relationships and the people that we find out later, like, man, you don't even know that day that you gave me a free coffee, like, it changed my life. And we're like, change your life? You know, what are you talking about? And it's like, yeah, you don't know that day, you know, I was contemplating ending it, you know? And I remember this one girl came in, and I just said, Marilyn, I feel like we just need to go give her a hug, like group hug it, you know? And so we lifted up the counter and we went over there and hugged her, and just, she seemed off that day, you know, a little bit, and we'd gotten to know her more and more. And then later we found out she had come in, and, you know, she was thinking about just, she wished she wasn't alive, you know? And so we hugged her, we prayed for her, gave her a free drink that day. And so she was like, that's the day that we changed her life, you know? It's just wow, you know, through a cup of coffee, mm-hmm. you know? So I think it's hard for people to realize sometimes that you don't need to put a fish on the door. You know, you don't need to announce that you're here and you're God's gift to the community. You know what I mean? You just start loving people, you know, and you serve them without expecting anything in return. And all of a sudden, like, the walls of people's hearts start just crumbling, you know, and it's been amazing.
Wow.
So that's when we just started thinking, like, man, I remember talking to this one guy, and for whatever reason, he wanted to be my mentor or something. And so I'm talking to him, and he said, man, you're gonna expand or what? And I was like, man, I'm not getting any sleep now. I don't think we could do that. And he said, okay. He said, so your business is changing the community, it's changing lives, it's bringing God's kingdom. He said, is there a reason why you don't think God would want that business in every community? And so I was just like, ouch. I'm like, okay, you know what? If God wants it, let's do it, you know? But what we found, you were talking about faith, and what we found is that, the Bible talks about going from glory to glory to glory, right? It's this idea of never being stagnant, always growing, always moving, just following God, wherever he's taking you, and so what we found is that the more we say yes, the more situations we end up in that we feel like we're going to lose our ever-loving minds, So it doesn't really matter. I think the moment that you are sitting in your chair and you're going, wow, well, that was, I'm where I want to be, and I'm happy and content here. I think that's the beginning of the end, when it comes to business and expansion or whatever. But the more we say yes, the scarier it gets. Just this place that you're sitting in right now, like, we didn't have the money before we started building it out, but the person that works with us, it was kind of like all of a sudden he was ready to go. He was in between jobs that he was doing. He had just finished working at a plumbing company. He had the time. And we weren't ready, but we said, okay, just start working, man, and we'll figure it out. And that just seems like we've said that so many times,
Mm-hmm.
just start, we'll figure it out, and he does. I mean, after we were already working on this space, we end up in the middle of another SBA loan that goes from $1 million and it ends up at $4 million that we're going to get this SBA loan. And I just started having like a bad feeling about it. I just thought somebody's motives are not right here, and talking to the people and the brokers and stuff, whenever I was talking to them, I just started getting this bad feeling. And we just talked one day and we just decided to cancel. I mean, we're right at that. We need money. We're like hemorrhaging money because we're paying this contractor like more than what we get paid, plus all the materials that he's having to buy. And we just sat down and we said, we just feel like we need to, and they were just shocked. We just like, hey, just forget the whole thing. Like, we're not going to do it. And so then that day I'm driving, and then a name of a guy comes to my mind, and I text him. I said, hey man, let me meet you in Cleveland and show you kind of what's going on. So he comes in and he sees what's happening so far, and I'm telling him the vision, and the more I talk about it, the more I'm going, oh man, what could happen here? I'm starting to sell him, the same way I was selling Angel, on the vision. And I'm just telling him, I'm like, man, we're going nationwide and whatever, and we're doing all this stuff. And he's starting to get excited talking to me, and we're talking about franchising and talking about all these things. And I think it was the next week we had all the money that we needed to finish.
Wow.
Like in a matter of days. And so now it's even, even more has come from that. So now we're, essentially, like, God is starting to bring this team together where, like, we can just focus on the vision, and God is providing all the real estate and all the build out funds and everything. And we just say, hey, we do the research, we find the locations, we follow the Lord, and we say, hey, let's buy this place and let's build this out. And they say, oh, okay, let's do it. And then they purchase the real estate and they pay for the build out, and we keep expanding. I mean, this is what has happened just like recently. I mean, just today we were at a lawyer's office and got the biggest check we have gotten and put it in the bank today.
Wow.
I mean, that just happened today. So we haven't even had a moment to really like celebrate, right, that it's happened. But man, every and like I said earlier, I thought $56,000 was a lot, and now it's $50,000 is not anything. It's like chump change, to a big vision, But yeah, it's a lot of cool things happening.
What I love hearing as you continue to share and expand on this is happening and this is happening is that never once has it failed to say, and look what God did. Because you're saying, look at all these things that are happening. But at some point, credit is always given where credit is due.
Yep.
And I've heard it said a lot of times describing spiritual gifts that a gift becomes a spiritual gift when it's used for an eternal purpose. And the vision that you have for business or the willingness to make things happen that we're just going to figure it out when it happens, that is, you could say that's an entrepreneurial gift in and of itself. That's a talent, being able to have a vision for things that aren't yet created. But when you connect it to an eternal purpose and then give God the credit, that's when it's becoming the spiritual gift of faith, saying, I have faith that it'll work out. But no, I have faith that the Lord is going to be the one to work it out, and having a vision and a feel for even the language to describe what hospitality is, and setting a culture in all of your shops that this is what we want people to feel like when they leave. That is using that gift to show other people how to use it, even if they're not gifted in that way.
Yeah.
But that gift is setting a culture that could change somebody's life.
Right.
And even a spiritual gift, it's used for earthly assignments that make an eternal impact. And a coffee shop is an earthly assignment.
Yep.
It's giving people coffee. It's giving people a place to work behind the counter or at one of the tables.
Yep.
But it's leaving an eternal impact. And that gives so much more purpose to our earthly assignments. Not everybody's going to be in ministry that has the eternal impact and the eternal assignment.
Yeah.
But when you're using your earthly assignment to make eternal impact and then giving credit that the only reason it's making the kind of impact that it is and it's growing the way that it is because we're using the space that the Lord is giving us to have conversations like that, to change somebody's life through a cup of coffee. And when you're giving them either a cup of cold water or a cup of coffee, you're connecting them to living water. Giving them a pastry is connecting them to the bread of life that can completely change their life.
Exactly.
But sometimes you need the cup of coffee or the space to create an opportunity to leave that kind of impact. And I feel like that's what you're doing here.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, you have to create space intentionally. Obviously you need kind of like a mission that starts you, and kind of gives you the wherewithal from the beginning to do it. But, whether it's a church service, like whether it's in worship, you can take something holy and you can make it rote and lifeless. You can do that with anything, right? But the moment you're intentional to create space is the moment that God comes in and he'll fill the space, and I think a lot of times we just need to, it takes faith to create the space, because it's, I remember going to a church one time and the guy, we'd always talk about the order of service and he's like, no dead space. That was like his phrase, we don't want any dead space. When this person stops singing, like there's got to be something right after. And if there's quiet, like, it's, and, what I realized in worship especially is that, man, you got to give people, time to respond. You got to give people time to connect with God, because what's the use in being in a worship service when people are coming to encounter Jesus and there is no space? All you're doing is from the, they walk in and there's a countdown, right? The countdown ends, announcements ends before the person's off stage. The band is already playing the first song, second song, third song, fourth song. Before the fourth song is over, the pastor is already at the pulpit praying to start his message and ends the message. And before he ends, people are already walking out the door. Where did they have a moment? Where did they have a moment to connect? Where was the intentionality? Are we just and people complain all the time, man, I wish people would just stop being consumers. They just come here and they don't pay tithe and all they do is they're just consumers. We have a problem. Well, the problem is that you haven't taught them not how to be a consumer. Like all you're doing is feeding them this. They don't know how to act any different, right? Because you haven't created space for them to not be a consumer. Like you really need a moment to where you say, okay, everything that we've been singing about right now, let's focus our attention on God right in this moment and have this moment. And I think it's the same in business. If you're following business, and you're trying to intentionally create an atmosphere for connection, like you have to create the space. And I think we have tried to make it a point to say, hey, it's not how fast you get the drink out, because I remember having an argument with somebody like, hey, I think you can get these drinks out a lot faster. I'm like, yeah, we probably can, but so like, why do you want to get it out? I think as long as somebody gets a drink in within 4 or 5 minutes, like if they're walking in, like they're going to be fine. And while they're there for that 5 minutes, we're talking to them and they're having a great time, and we're connecting with them. We're interacting. We're finding out about their lives, all this stuff, right? And man, she did not like that I didn't agree with her that the baristas could work a lot faster, But if the mission is for people to be seen, heard, and valued, then we have to be intentional to see them when they walk in, make eye contact, right? Welcome them when they come in, hear what they're saying, not just their order, what's behind the order, right? And then let them know that they're valued. When you remember their drink, when you remember their name, when you remember that, hey, last time I talked to you, is your mom okay now? Like you said that you had to go to the hospital or whatever to see her. And that blows people's minds. I mean, obviously when somebody tells me like their drink is bad, like I about lose it, right? Because I think we have the best coffee, and if it's not good, something's wrong. But I got one of the worst reviews ever at one of our locations. This girl, she said, I've been in Farmhouse Coffee twice, and she said, neither time did I like the drink. And I'm just thinking, what in the world? Why was the drink so bad? And she said, but those people and that environment and that shop was so amazing. I will keep coming back just to have a drink that I don't like. And I think we had just had a little talk with some people about how important it is to make that connection. And this review came right after. Of course, we sent it out to everybody. We're like, look, this is what we're talking about. Obviously, we want them to like the drink, but this proves our point that she didn't just give us a 1 star. She gave us a 4-star review for not liking the product.
Wow. Like,
I rest my case. Like, imagine now if the product is where it's supposed to be and the connection is there, this is, we could change the world, but our our kind of the way we prioritize things, you know, is of course prayer is like the first P and it's the most important. But people, whether it's the people that are coming in or it's the people behind the counter, the people, the product, and then profit. You know, it's important that we make money, but in our minds, profit is the last thing that we're thinking about, because, you know, if you end up just making decisions on profit, then what are we really doing, you know? And if you just make decisions on the product, then a lot of times you miss the people, you know? But if you put your emphasis on the people, then everything else kind of just comes together, you know? And the culture behind the counter, the culture, the environment that you have, you know, the intentionality that you use and the space you're creating, you know, you can create something really, really beautiful, you know?
And I can attest, I'm a frequent flyer at one of your locations. And especially when I moved back to this area, because I grew up out on the other side of town. Because, you know, when people say they're from Atlanta, they're not really from Atlanta.
Right.
So I can say I'm from around here, but it's too far down the road to be local. So when I moved back up here, I work all over the place. So I need to have, you know, offices at all the local coffee shops.
Right.
To have my Gainesville office, my Dawsonville office. And so it became a frequent flyer there. And it was so nice over time to feel like I had in this town that I felt like I really wasn't from, that I could go and be like, oh, they remembered my name. I remember the first time one of them remembered my name and I was like, oh my gosh.
That is awesome.
And something that simple.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because even in scripture, names are huge.
Yes.
And for someone to remember your name was crazy. And then I host a Bible study with an organization, NG3, that our church is really involved in. And so I host a Bible study with one of the high school volleyball teams up there. And in the spring, we always meet at Farmhouse. And we started meeting there. And it was so cool. One, having a space where you can talk about that in and of itself, we should be grateful for. But then being able to even talk about it with some of the baristas, and some of them knew. I think one of them's on a mission trip right now. He's not even working there at this point. Yep. But for us,
I think it's
to have,
Liam.
Yes,
I think he's back now. He's
Liam,
back. Yep.
Yes. And for you to create a space where you don't have to tell anyone, but just to have a space to get to talk about Jesus amongst yourselves. And then for other people to get to notice, that's a space in and of itself. That's putting the Lord's glory on display. But then to have opportunities across the counter to be able to say, what are you guys talking about? And whether you know Jesus or not, you're getting an opportunity to talk about what God is doing. Yeah. And the exchange of a cup of coffee creates that opportunity. And I've heard a lot of people say and see interruptions throughout your day as opportunities that God is giving you to talk to somebody, to pour into them. And your coffee taking a little bit longer, or getting to order with someone face to face and getting to order a coffee, that's an opportunity to be able to talk about Jesus, or not to, and to simply remember their name. And that could change the entire course of their day. Yeah. And just everything about the culture that you're setting, the vision that you have for it, the heart behind it. The obstacles are opportunities to talk about what God is doing. Yeah. And the intentionality behind the culture that you're creating is another opportunity to say, but this is why. We're not just trying to give you a cup of coffee. We're trying to connect you to something bigger. Yeah. And through the earthly assignment of running a coffee shop, you're connecting and leaving an eternal impact because of the intentionality with which you go about it. And it reminds me, there's a verse in 1st or 2nd Thessalonians that said, we cared about you so much that we didn't just care to share with you the gospel of God, but our lives as well.
Lives. Yeah. That's awesome.
And that just echoes in what you're saying, is that you care more than just to say, hey, this is the gospel, but hey, we're going to be here every day. And we're going to set a precedent and a culture to create a space where we don't have to tell you about it every single day, to give you an opportunity to be cared for, to be seen, to be heard, to be valued.
You just show it.
And to show it. Yeah. And a lot of times that leaves such a bigger impact than, hey, let me tell you about Jesus. Yeah. But people think there must be something different. And when you share your story, when you tell your why, when you remember their name, that's leaving an impact that is I think, eternal.
Or their drink order, you know?
Yes.
But I remember, man, this great, there was this great thing that happened one time is one of the things that helped our expansion was the trailer when we built the mobile trailer. And we did that, like, we opened in March, and I think in October we had the trailer built. So that we didn't realize what that was going to do, but our heart was behind the trailer was like to go bless the schools and the teachers and give. And so what ended up happening was the farther we moved towards Gainesville, the more fans we got. And so we started doing weddings and all these things. And we did this wedding and met this one girl, and her name's Betsy. And so we did this trailer event, met her, and there's even a bigger backstory. Like, she knew my cousin in Ohio and all this stuff. And she worked for Chick-fil-A in the marketing, and we had just come back from Ohio to seeing my cousin, and we told her that my cousin is an operator at Chick-fil-A. And she said, "What's your cousin's name?" I was like, "Paul." And so she gets her phone out and shows me my cousin. She was like on the team to do their grand opening. It was just crazy. Like, we're talking to her and we connect at the trailer, make her drink. And there was another day that we ended up taking the trailer out, and I knew we were in Gainesville, and God just brought her to my mind, Betsy. And I said, "Hey, Betsy, do you want a coffee?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm at whatever Chick-fil-A." And I said, "All right, we'll be there." And so I remembered her drink, a white chocolate raspberry with a light ice. I mean, very specific. So I show up and I give her the drink. She goes, "You remember my drink?" And I was like, yeah, it's white chocolate raspberry, light ice. And I don't remember if she told me in that moment or she texted me later and told me, but she said, "I just want you to know that, like, you made one of my dreams come true." And I'm thinking, okay, what's this lady talking about, you know? And and she said, "I remember growing up and watching these movies and these girls or whatever." She said, I'm like 13 or 14. And she said, they'd go into a coffee shop and, like, it was their place and the people knew their drink and their name. And that was like, she said, "I always had said growing up, I can't wait to find my coffee shop where the people know my drink and my name." She goes, you just like made that dream come true." And so we use that story a lot for our team members, just to say that you think it's like insignificant, but like, who would have thought she's dreamed this like her whole life, she's like in her mid-20s now. And since she was a tween, she thought about it. Right. And this little act of remembering, and being just a little intentionality, to go extra, like, is just huge, so.
And is that not a reflection of even being made in God's image, that he knows all of our names? And that's like a fundamental psychological need that they talk about, is belonging and identity.
Yes.
And even creating a space to belong. Yep. And whether it be, you might not get the chance to explain it to everybody who walks in, but you're talking to the people that you get to train and you get to work with, saying that just remembering that meets one of their needs, but also like, let me tell you about why everybody in the universe has this need, this desire to be known. Yeah. Is that we were created by a Father who wants to know us, that wants to have a relationship with us, and we're disconnected from that. Yeah. And if you can connect them to that need, that whether you get to tell them or not, you're getting to tell somebody that that's why we have a desire for this. Yeah. And I know we could keep talking about what God is doing all day.
What's funny is that the everything we just talked to the students about was that. I mean, so what we did at the beginning of the trailer, so we served the students first. It was all the RAs for this semester. And so we said, let's bring the coffee trailer. And if we're going to talk about hospitality, then let's show them hospitality and then we'll do a devotion on it, right? So there were some people's names that we wrote down. Like the first guy that came, his name was Wesley, and then Hudson after that. Hudson got a funky white boy latte, and there was this other girl that her name was Amy, but Marilyn was like making sure we spelled it right. So it was AIMEE, and so it was all these little kind of special names and situations we wrote down. One guy wanted a Twix, but without the caramel. So he just wanted chocolate, and so we wrote these things down. And then at the beginning, we said, hey, it's great meeting you guys. Like, you're the funky white boy and then this, and we went through 5 or 6. But then at the back end, when we talked about God removing this distance, we said, just like we mentioned your names, God doesn't just know your name, but like he knows something that you think would be insignificant, which is your drink order. I mean, you think, days that we're about to take the trailer out, and then God, speaks to Marilyn and says, hey, today we don't usually take coconut milk with us, but it could be coconut or soy, but it's something weird out of the blue that's just like, hey, do this today. And we go, and it's for one person. The one person says, I know you probably can't do this, but do you possibly have coconut milk? Actually, we do, because before we left today, the Lord spoke to Marilyn and said, bring coconut milk today. And what you think, God knows you down to, okay, you're going to have coffee today, and I want to make sure coconut milk is there for you.
Wow. Because
he loves you so much. Like, that seems so insignificant, but the creator of the universe, like, is right here, and he knows you so well that he's going to speak to us before we leave and tell us to bring coconut milk.
Wow.
It's just, it's so powerful, and, but all that we taught, and the belonging, we taught about that too, and how Jesus, if you look at these stories where Jesus showed us the model of, we're always trying to get people, we try to get them into the church so they can believe, and a lot of times some churches won't let you in to believe until you look like them. So if you look a certain way, you actually can't even go into the church, so they want you to become a certain way before you even have entry into where you can even believe, right? And then once you look the way they want you to look, and once you believe the way they want you to believe, and you're a, right-wing conservative, then you can belong, because if you don't like this, if you didn't vote for this person, and you don't believe this way, and you don't think that, hey, you shouldn't do this, and you don't look like this, then I'm sorry, you're not in the club, But Jesus, like, he flipped that whole thing over, and he said, I don't care if you're an outcast or whatever, Zacchaeus, like, I'm going to your house today, man. Like, we're gonna hang out, and he didn't point his finger at him. Like we sang in the kids song, we always got to that part and we were like, pointed at Zacchaeus and telling him to get his rear end down off that tree right now, before I get my belt out, take my belt off, but scripture says that Zacchaeus came down rejoicing. So, I mean, you don't usually rejoice when somebody's pointing their finger in your face, out of disgust and anger and judgment and condemnation and all that. It said he jumped off that tree, like a little leprechaun. he jumped out of that tree like a Keebler elf. He was ready to, Jesus was like, man, we're going to hang out today, and then he got to his house, and then Zacchaeus, the transformation started, but the becoming was before the transformation. The space was created for him to be accepted for who he was, shortcomings, all these things. And then it caused him to then give everything he had taken away back 7 times, and then believe at the end. Like, Jesus said, salvation has come to this house. All because Jesus said, I'm not gonna point the finger at you like everybody else, but you are worth, and you are valuable enough for me to just come spend time with you, even though everybody, has cast you aside. Like I don't cast you aside.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's powerful.
Yeah, that's so good. And I know we got to wrap up because we could
Yes.
probably sit here and talk all night about everything that the Lord has done.
Split it up into 2 podcasts.
We could. But I want to thank you for sitting down and sharing your story. And I go back to what it echoes in that verse, that you not only shared the gospel of God, but your life with us as well through this conversation. And both of them brought glory and attention to the kingdom. Both of them gave credit where credit is due. And whether it be explicitly sharing the gospel or sharing your life and you seeing how the Lord is moving through it, how he's weaving a thread through all of it, it's bringing him glory through this earthly assignment of a coffee shop. And who would have imagined how much you could share about the gospel through the life that you're building through all of these coffee shops and locations. And
Crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's how the Lord typically works best, is through the ways we would least expect it, because his ways are so much higher than our ways and better than our ways and anything we could ever imagine.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for sharing the gospel through sharing your life with us in this conversation and the precedent that you're setting and all the spaces that you're creating through these.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again so much for watching and joining. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you share it with a friend. And if you're interested on the spiritual gifts that the Lord has given you, we have a link that you can take the assessment and discover not just what he's given you, but how he's already been using you and your life and the people around you.